Hello everybody, welcome back to MelDidItHerself. And in today's video we are going to be making this DIY bench on a budget. So I actually ended up being able to use mostly items that were already in my DIY supplies and kind of scrap wood pile. So it only cost me $12 to make this bench. I needed something to go in this space when you walk into our guest room. It's kind of right in front there. I wanted to make use of the space, but it was kind of a short, awkward length. So my friend Holly at Holly Be at Home had made a little slat bench for her plants recently, and so I got inspired by that and kind of followed her plan that she had made. So I'll be sure to link her Instagram below so you can go check out what she made. It turned out awesome. But yeah, so I'm going to take you through how I made this. So I wanted to keep this a cheap build because it wasn't really anything that was necessary. Like, it was just kind of for aesthetics. It wasn't really having a purpose. I just wanted that basket that I had there to be a little bit elevated to kind of draw the eye up, and to be able to house like a blanket and a couple towels for the guests. So I wanted to keep it cheap because I knew this wasn't like a utility piece in the house. So luckily the owners of the home that we bought had left a bunch of scrap wood pieces and 2x4s up in the garage. So it ended up that those pieces were going to work perfect for this build. So I just made a bit of a plan in my notebook as to how many cuts and what lengths I was going to need. So based on the size of the space that I wanted to fill, I wanted it to be 22 inches long by 15 to 15 and a half inches wide and about 15 inches tall, which actually later I found out that those were incorrect, but that's what I'm going off of based on where we're at in the video right now. So that means that I needed two 22-inch pieces, two 15-inch pieces, and then four 15-inch pieces for the legs. So I'm just going through and marking those with a tape measure and a pencil here, and I'm actually using a level to make sure I draw straight lines across the beams themselves because I'm using a jigsaw to make the cuts. So I have to make sure that they're as straight as possible, and I'm really bad at eyeballing that. And I was just making sure that I knew which pieces to kind of like make the most of the wood that I had, seeing which pieces I would make which cuts with, if that makes sense. So this is a jigsaw that I got for $20 off of someone on Kijiji. It is old as hell, but it does the trick. I just wanted one that I could like play around with, try it out, and then one day I'm going to invest in getting a newer, probably a table saw once I get my workbench made up in the garage. But this did the trick. So I'm just going through and making the cuts, trying as much as I could to stick to that line that I had drawn. Definitely having a workbench with some clamps will in the future make this a little bit easier. It was vibrating so much and I'm pushing down so hard with my poor arm, was so tired at the end of this. Eventually I started putting my knee on the wood, which did help to secure it a bit, but you know, just being resourceful and making the most of what I have. But obviously this is just our back deck, which is also very much not straight or sturdy. It's horribly made. So anyways, and I promise my ponytail was nowhere near the saw. I wasn't anywhere near getting my hair cut or caught in it. You will also notice that I am wearing safety goggles. I highly suggest, if you're ever really working with any power tools or doing any sanding or anything like that, it doesn't hurt to throw on sunglasses or safety goggles because you never know when a piece could go flying, and you know, our vision is pretty important, so protect your eyes. And I'm also being sure when the saw is on that I'm keeping my fingers very far away from where I'm cutting. So now once I've made the cuts, I'm using my orbital sander, and this stupid piece of sandpaper did not want to stick on it today. I think it was like too hot and humid. It was probably like 35 degrees Celsius that day. So anyways, it falls off a couple times. But I'm just going and sanding down the sides of the pieces of wood as well as the ends that I had cut, just to make sure everything is smooth. Like I said, this is older wood, so there was like just some gunk and stuff on it instead of like wiping it down super thoroughly. I'm just sanding off kind of the top layer of it. And then also what this is going to do is open up the pores of the wood in order for the stain to get accepted into the wood in a very like even fashion. As well, for the ends that I cut, I'm just taking some time to really go through and make sure it's very sanded and smooth, because the ends where you cut can tend to take on a little bit extra stain because it's like open wood pores, because it's been cut. I don't really know like the science behind it, but you'll notice if you don't really sand the ends down super thoroughly, then it'll be like darker than the sides of the wood piece. So just a little tip to take a little bit extra time to do those edges really well. See, this thing just keeps flying off. Oh my god, I was going crazy. At the end, I just ended up like pushing down so hard so that it wouldn't fly off. So once everything was thoroughly sanded, I just went through, and I won't bore you with the process, but with a damp microfiber cloth, just wipe down all of these sides to make sure there's no more dust and stuff sitting on it. So now I'm just going ahead and staining all of the pieces. So this is a stain, it's a Minwax stain that I had sitting in my DIY supplies, and this is English chestnut finish. I've used it previously for a little IKEA upcycle that I did on a kitchen bar cart, so I had an idea of the color that it was going to give me. And so I'm just going through with a lint-free cloth. I bought a big pack of them from, I think, Home Depot for a few dollars, and I just find they're good at accepting this stain, and it kind of puts it on in a even fashion. So I'm just going through, and I would recommend wearing gloves when you do this, because afterwards, because it's an oil-based stain, it's so annoying to try and like wash your hands and you have like sticky stain on your hands for like days, to be honest. So later on I did grab some gloves, but at this point I'm just going through and putting a light coat of stain on all of the edges, top, bottom, sides, backs. And then I did end up going through as well and staining the slat pieces that I had picked up from Home Depot, which I will explain a little bit thoroughly after, but I didn't get that on camera. So this is just the base and the legs that I'm doing at this point, but I did go through and do the large slat pieces as well. So now that we have everything stained and dried, this is the next day, and I'm just going through with the large slat pieces that I have and determining how many cuts I can get out of one piece. So these, I don't know actually what the total length of them was. They were the second size up at Home Depot from the smallest. So the first shortest length that they had, this was in the crafting section, would have been, I would have only been able to get one 15.5-inch cut out of it, and then I would have had a lot of leftover, and they were about $1, like 40 something. So I went to the next size up, and it was actually going to fit 3 slat cuts at 15.5 inches perfectly. So that meant I was going to have to buy much less of them. It would have been like about $20 to do this, but instead it cost me $12 for all of the slat pieces. So I just made the cuts, and so they're 15.5 inches each. And again, I'm just getting resourceful in terms of my sawhorses. These are my patio table chairs. Okay, so I realized that I screwed up all my measurements a bit, so I'm just going to first double check this. So I want this to fit so that can open. And this is snug against the wall. That's good. We got a little bit of clearance there. Perfect. But then, I don't know what kind of measurements I made, but do not take into account the width of the 2x4s. I'm gonna have to cut these guys down. So I went ahead and measured how big those width pieces needed to be, or how long they had to be, in order for the slats to be able to kind of hang over the edges a little bit. I didn't take into account the added width from the wood itself, so lesson learned for next time. So I just cut those down, and then I didn't need to bother restaining the edges because they're going to be on the inside anyways. So that worked out well. So that's why it's really important to dry fit your piece before you actually start putting it together, because I would have had this all together and then noticed that that wasn't going to work out. So there's a little tip. So I'm just going through with some 2.5-inch construction wood nails, screws, and drilling those into the frame. I did 2 per piece, so like on this side there'll be 2 on that end and 2 on the other end, and then when I flip it over there'll be 2 on each end as well to hold it into place. I did end up putting a little bit of wood filler inside the screws because they kind of like stood out a lot against the wood color, and I think the wood filler ended up kind of making it stand out a little bit more. I probably should have like added a bit of stain maybe in the inside there to make them kind of not stand out quite as much, but whatever, lesson learned. I can always kind of drill them in a bit deeper and then cover over them with wood filler if you prefer that look. But again, this was like one of my first woodworking builds, so you live and you learn. These patio stones are also not that even, so it is a miracle that this ended up turning out like an actual rectangle and not looking like a trapezoid. But yeah, things are gonna get a lot easier once I just get myself a workbench with some clamps. Okay, so I have the base created right now, and I'm just seeing with the legs that I've cut if they will be a good fit. I can tell they're not 100% all equal length, or this area isn't level because this one leg keeps falling out. But I think overall, I think it's higher than I want it to be. Well, actually, let's see, because the reason I want to make it is to have this on top. Let's stay. Whoops. I mean, that's probably fine. I'll just make sure that these are all the exact same length and all flat so that it sits relatively even. So because I'm just going to be using this to put like a light basket with just a couple towels and a blanket on it, and I'm not using this for people to be sitting on it or anything, so it doesn't really have to be super structurally sound. I'm just using liquid nails to attach the legs for the bench, instead of like making pocket holes and drilling it in and making sure it's super sturdy. If I were making it for people to sit on, I would definitely kind of think more about making it a little bit more structurally sound, but we're just going this route because it's quick and it's easy, and this is essentially just for decoration. So I'm just making sure to cover it thoroughly on the base of the legs here, and not putting too much of the adhesive on because I didn't want it to like come out the edges, because it does dry white. And I'm holding it on for, about 10 seconds or so for it to start to adhere, and then not touching it, because they take like about an hour to kind of like set into place, and then I just let it sit overnight too, just so I knew that they were going to be, well attached and I wouldn't mess with them prior. So then we're back to the slats. So I've made the cuts on the slats Now I'm just going through and lightly sanding all of the edges on both sides because number one, they're not super, like the jigsaw didn't make super great cuts on them, to be honest. There was it was kind of like splintery, so I'm just sanding those down. And as well, I didn't want it to look like raw wood on the edges. I wanted it to all be seamless, so I was going to go through and stain those edges as well after, but I'm just using I think this was like 150 grit sandpaper, sanding down the edges, and then I went through, lined them up, and stained those edges as well. So once they were all stained and dried, then I went through and did a dry fit on the bench. So this is what it's going to end up looking like. I tried to evenly space out the slats as well. So I know that it's going to fit, so now I can go ahead and start adhering them on there. So again, I'm just using the liquid nails because it's all I really needed. I didn't want to like waste a bunch of screws, and I don't have a brad nailer. If I had a brad nailer, I'd probably just use that to adhere them. Again, that's probably something that will be on my wish list to get moving forward in terms of power tools, because it would make this so much quicker and easier. But again, I'm just making sure that I'm not using too much of the adhesive so that it doesn't kind of splooge out the sides there. And I'm just holding down the slat and marking the edges where the beams are going to line up so that I know that that's the only spot that I have to use the liquid nails, because I'm not going to waste it and go all across the top of the slat if it's only on that part of the frame that it's touching, right? So I'm just lining it up, making sure that each of the slats are lined up with the previous one too, so that it's generally going to be in a straight line. And then I'm just pressing down firmly on it, and I grabbed a couple pots that were kind of like heavy ceramic to hold them down while it dried for the first little bit. Once everything was dried, this is what we are ending up with. I am really proud of how it turned out. This is only my second kind of woodworking build, so all in all, it turned out pretty great, I think, and I'm loving seeing it there. Hope you guys enjoyed and learned something new. Follow me on Instagram if you aren't, at MelDidItHerself, and I would love it if you would please subscribe below. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day.